let's talk about thriving in the face of change with the NAR settlement. Highlights from NAR. I'm going to occasionally, if you don't mind, I'm going to have somebody else read this so I can think about what I'm going to say next. So Jessica, do you mind reading this for us?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Highlights from NAR Settlement. All NAR Realtor members except BHHS Home Services affiliates are covered. Agents. Note that Anywhere, RE/MAX, and KW already settled. Approximately 90 brokers that are above $2 billion in sales volume are not covered by the NAR settlement. Their realtors are covered. NAR settlement includes rule changes that go into effect July 2024. Includes 3 main seller lawsuits and all copycats. Does not include the buyer lawsuits. Settlement must be approved by the court.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So essentially there's just a few companies that aren't covered by this settlement. Okay, Berkshire Hathaway. And then there's 90 brokers that won't be covered because they do over $2 billion a year. So basically they're saying they can still go after these brokers for more settlements, okay? We don't fit into that, okay? You guys aren't doing that much business. I kind of wish you're doing 1.5 billion, but so they're covered. And then the rule changes will go into effect in July. They were anticipating mid, now they're anticipating end of July. But the great thing is this includes all copycat lawsuits. So our board of realtors here, AAR, our MLS here, already had received lawsuits, okay? So those are all gonna go away with the settlement. So, so that's a really good thing. So that's one reason why they're doing the settlement, because this was just gonna go, you put blood in the water and attorneys are gonna be there, right? Any attorneys here? Sorry. So, and then it does need court approval. They anticipate that it will get court approval. Even if there's maybe some minor changes, there won't be any dramatic changes. Okay, so that's the feeling in the industry. So, all right. Okay, on NAR's website from the president, I got this information. So the agreement will end the litigation. It was a costly fight, current ruling. They did feel that they would eventually win, but it might have cost more than the settlement for all the attorney, you know, and gone on for years. And in the meantime, you have all these copycats that kept coming up that had to be addressed and all the money. So they felt like it was in their best interest to settle, even though they felt like they were in the right. So it is what it is. So they're going to pay $418 million over a 4-year period, and agreed to changes on how compensation is paid and negotiated. Okay, and that's what a lot we're going to talk about today. Compensation rule changes. Vanessa, do you want to read this one?
Yeah. No requirement to be a member in an association or MLS to receive compensation. Out of MLS, don't need compensation agreement. No offer of buyer broker compensation allowed in Realtor MLS. Can't create a non-MLS mechanism, portal, social group, etc. for the purpose of listing brokers making compensation offers to buyer brokers. Buyer broker compensation can be listed on brokerage or agent website for broker listings only.
Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. So, compensation's in the offer now. So it doesn't matter whether you belong to the MLS. So if you want to write an offer in the White Mountains or somewhere that's outside of our MLS, you can do that. If you have a real estate broker that doesn't belong to a board at all, or even the MLS, they can write an offer, put the compensation in there, and they can get paid. Okay? So you can't have any offer of compensation allowed at all in the MLS. So that's a big change. Oh, and I was going to mention here too. So right now, excuse me, right now, if you were going to write an offer in Payson, for example, let's say you had a friend, family member that was going to write an offer, wanted to buy a place in Payson. If you don't belong to that MLS, Well, the agreement to pay a commission is in the MLS, and by you belonging to the same MLS that's listed to, insured you a commission. So I have a form that was in Paperless Pipeline that was an out-of-area commission agreement. You get the brokers to sign it to make sure you were going to get paid on that deal, because otherwise there was no guarantee. They might still pay you, but there's no guarantee. Now you're not going to have to worry about that. I can remove that form, okay? So let's talk about this. So that's what a lot of agents were starting to speculate. Well, we'll just create our own website, forum, social media group that's going to say what the commissions are. Well, you can't do that in any way. But what you can do is brokers and agents can have a website that they're personally saying are listings. It can only be their listings. They can't have a hub for other brokers or agents. But their particular listings, they can list what the compensation is on those properties, okay? All right.
So nobody can see that, but just the agents that are associated with the office?
So a broker could have a link where anybody could log into their website, look through listings, and those listings could say we're paying this compensation, okay?
So other agents, public, everybody.
Yep, they can go to your website, look at your listings, and see what's being offered for
But
compensation.
you said they need a link or an invitation or something provided to them?
GentryAZ.com.
Yeah, just go to our website.
Yes, is your answer.
Yeah. What's that?
Are you gonna do that?
I don't know. We'll probably look into it. I'm kind of waiting to see what everybody else is going to do, because I don't want to spend much money on a portal on our website, and then that ends up not being the way things are being done.
So you're saying they list compensation for the buyer side, right?
Yeah, you can't put any commission, man, my voice today, you can't put any commission at all in MLS. But are you talking about on the actual
Yeah. 'cause,
broker's
I mean,
page?
The listing agent's still gonna negotiate compensation with the person selling the house, but on the buyer side,
Oh,
I guess I'm more curious about how the buyer side's gonna work.
yeah, we're going to go through that more. Let me know if I don't answer your question, though. All right, contract disclosure rule changes. You cannot state that services are free unless there's no compensation from any source. So that's one of the settlement things, okay? That was kind of a rule anyway. They're just making sure that it's, part of the settlement. Must disclose that fees and commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. I'm pretty sure that's already in our documents. Okay. All right, buyer broker must have the buyer sign the buyer broker agreement and negotiate fees prior to showing the property in the MLS. Okay, so that's one of the changes. You have to have them sign a buyer broker agreement before you show them properties. Okay, so
required by
that's a
every
law.
broker?
That
Every
is a
broker?
law across the whole United
Not
States.
just a policy with
Yep.
Gentry, but it's
Yep.
everybody's got
Yep,
that.
that's part of the settlement, so that is a law. So you have to have them signed. So I could kind of see this coming. That's why I started making the buyer broker agreement required in January, right? So just a reminder, buyer broker agreement is a contract between you and the buyer. Okay, anything that says agreement, listing agreement, that's a contract. Anything that says agreement is also a contract. So according to Arizona state law, a broker has to review all contracts within a certain period of time. We want them within 5 days to make sure it gets in appliance, right? Compliance.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm taking somebody out, and before I can take them to that house, I've got to have them sign it, even though.
After July. After
Well, yeah,
July.
yeah, but,
Yes.
well, I understand that, but, so we just go to this one house. Maybe for 2 months I'm showing him stuff, and then all of a sudden he just decides he doesn't want anything. Something went down the toilet, but I still turn that buyer broker agreement into you, even though we don't have an agreement. Or we don't have a contract.
Once both people sign a buyer broker agreement, it's a contract.
Okay,
And I need it.
okay,
I have to review it.
okay.
Okay? Yeah.
So when you say both parties, mean you and the buyer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Buyer
Yep.
agent and the buyer.
Yep.
So it cannot be implied anymore that is your client.
Yeah. Yep. It's got to have it in writing. Okay? And I suggest, you should be doing this now before you go show properties, right? Okay.
Andrew, so what does that imply? does that imply that if the seller does not pay the commissions, the buyer?
We're going to go through a lot of that. Let me know if I don't answer your question though, okay? All right, so the amount of the compensation cannot be open-ended. So when you do a buyer-broker agreement, you cannot just say, you know, between 1 and 3%, or whatever is offered, you know, whatever we can negotiate. It can't be open-ended. It has to be a specific percent or amount, okay? So if you have, you know, just 0 in there and it's blank, then, you know, you're not going to get anything, okay? So you've got to put something in on that line. What is your compensation? All right, seller concession rules. Seller may offer concessions via MLS for buyer closing cost, but cannot be specifically buyer agent compensation. You know, offer a percentage or specific amount. Okay, so everything's going to change from the verbiage of commission to concession. Okay, so just remember that, just concessions, right? Concessions are subject to open negotiations. Oh, they must be asked for in the contract. And the buyer agent may not be paid more than pre-negotiated amount on the buyer-broker agreement. Okay? So right now, a lot of agents, I'm seeing buyer-brokers agreements come in, and a lot of agents are putting nothing on the compensation amount at all. Okay?
What's the point?
Sometimes they're putting whatever's offered in the MLS. Okay? So let's say you show a buyer 10 homes, you write 3 offers that are all too low or whatever, and they don't get done, and you finally get them into one that's offering $100 or 1%, and you've done all this work for your client, and you just put whatever's in the MLS. Believe it or not, a lot of MLS listings right now are offering 0 commission, and we'll have a slide on that later. Okay, so make sure you're filling that out now correctly. Put in what you're worth, put it in there. Okay?
So if you put in that you're willing to work for 2% commission and you find out the sellers are offering 3, you still only get the 2.
Yes,
Okay.
and the other 1% will go to your buyer to help them with closing cost or whatever. Okay, so you don't lose it, you just don't get it in commission. Okay? All right. Okay, any more questions on what we just went through? I think we've kind of went through most of them, and we're going to go on to the next section. Okay? Yes?
So, in that scenario, if in the buyer broker, you're, say, 2.5%, but then in the MLS, it's 2% going to the buyer, then what, can you reduce it by 0.5% at that point? No?
You can't revise it at some point?
Well, okay. So this is how I think that it's going to go, is the buyer, number one, if you say 2% and they're offering 3, you can't up it to get the whole 3, right? But let's just say you say 3 and you can only get negotiated 2. To me, every contract can be amended. Okay, so this is contract between you and your buyer. So I don't know why you wouldn't be able to do an amendment to the buyer-broker agreement agreeing to 2%.
To make the
Okay?
section happen.
Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine that wouldn't be allowed because, you know, but
You couldn't do
if
it the
you,
other way, huh?
I don't think you can do it the other way. Sounds like the verbiage in there is if you say 2 and you can get 3 negotiated, it goes to your buyer. Okay?
So you used to not be able to discuss commissions at all in a contract. Now we're
Now the buyer, we're going to go through this more, but the buyer's going to be helping you negotiate commission.
sure because they don't want to pay.
Yeah,
Right.
they're going to be helping you now. Okay, so look at it that way. I got my buyers helping me negotiate commission because, yeah, exactly. Okay, all right. Okay, so where are we as buyers representative agents? Okay, dispel confusion. We talked a little bit about this on your questions before we started. So we've got to dispel confusion. Confusion leads to fear. Fear left unchecked leads to panic, and panic leads to paralysis. That could happen in the public or it could happen with us agents, right? So we need to dispel, you know, all of the myths and the misnumbers and everything that are going on out there. Okay? So truth. Commissions have always been negotiable. Okay? Some of the public, I've heard people say, hey, I heard that you can't charge commission, or I heard commissions are negotiable now. Well, they've always been negotiable, right? So that's one thing that we need to dispel. Seller concessions can pay for buyer's agent's commissions. Okay, we kind of know that. Regardless of seller concessions being offered in the MLS, you can still write an offer asking for seller concessions, okay, for commissions. So I'm sure in the MLS now, they're going to add a field that says seller concessions offered, right? Okay, I don't know why they wouldn't. So seller concessions, you'll be able to see there if they're offering it. But if they're not, you can still write it into the offer. And if their home's been on the market 1 week, you know, maybe they don't accept anything. But 45 days, maybe they're accepting whatever they can get, okay? All right.
So when you do the seller concession, you'll be talking about it with your client and let him know that you are asking for 2% or
Yep.
seller
Yeah. So you'll go
concession
over
plus
with
the
that.
offer?
Yeah, we're going to go over that in a little bit. Okay. All right. So one thing is it needs to be any amount allowed by loan financing, right? Scott will go into that a little bit later. But a buyer, if they're getting a loan, there's certain loans that you can only pay a certain amount of concessions to the buyer. Okay, so you got to keep that in mind, and Scott will go over that more. Okay, all right. Do buyers still need a realtor? Okay. Do car owners still need mechanics? Right. Most do, some don't. Right. So it's going to be kind of the same as that. Some will think that they can do it without a realtor. Maybe the second time they don't think that anymore after all the problems. But you know, there's a lot of good mechanics that aren't necessarily mechanics for a living, but they can fix their own cars, okay? Same thing with income earners, okay? Most of us probably use an accountant, especially if we've got deductions and things like that. But some people take the time and the focus and everything to do it themselves, okay? Okay, so what do consumers think? So this is a survey done by Bright MLS, which is a large MLS in the East Coast. And it asked, which of the following statements do you agree with? This one is, when you buy a home, you should definitely have someone who represents your interest during the whole process. 76%. Okay? So it tells you what buyers are thinking.
Did he also ask, are you willing to pay for it?
Yeah. Buying a home is something you can do mostly on your own. Perhaps just with a lawyer to help you with paperwork. Only 24% agree to that statement, okay? So buyers still see the value of using a realtor. They pay for everything literally, we pay for everything that we get a service for, right? Nobody's gonna mow your lawn for free, okay? They need to get paid. So it's just a matter of focusing on change and how things are going to change and have the different processes. All right, so same MLS did a study. It said 91% of all of respondents agree it would be very stressful to navigate the home buying process without a real estate agent or broker. 87% of respondents believe that a real estate agent or broker is an essential, trusted advisor for the home buyer. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're valuable. Okay, so what most agents know what's happening, good agents understand what's happening, and great agents can explain what's happening. And that's what we want you to be able to do, is explain what's happening. Okay, change is the only constant. I got in the business in 1994. So prior to 94, everybody bought a book from the MLS, and it had all the listings in it. And then when that got too old, and because you'd have to call every one of them, is this still available? You know, is this home still available? So you're doing a lot of footwork. I had people complaining, because in 1994 when I got in the business, they said they're going to discontinue the books, and they were complaining. So So we started using computers, but at the time, only your broker had the computers. They'd have a bullpen or whatever full of, 5, 10 computers, and that's where you did everything. You printed them out on dot matrix, right? Okay. We used to have to go to the MLS when we buy an MLS book or some type of Thomas guide to help us find the houses, okay? Super easy now. Nobody should get lost on their way to a listing, okay? All right, so that's a change. I used to use one of these to help figure out payments, okay, for buyers. Okay, now we have apps, I know Magnus Title has, a nice little forum on their website where you can go and plug in all your buyer's information or seller's information and get them net sheets and payments information. So Palm Agent's another, an app out there that you can utilize. But so there's just different options, right, that we have available today. Another thing, when I first got in the business, or a little bit before then, you had sub-agency. Who's heard of sub-agency? Okay. All right. So a sub-agent was, you had the listing agent and the sub-agent, and they both represented the seller. There was no buyer's agent. Okay. So they both represented the seller. Seller didn't know what the sub-agent was telling the buyer at all. So there was a little liability there. Agents were complaining about the buyer-broker change. Heard them in my office all the time. I can't believe they're doing that. That's probably not right. I don't know why that's legal. So the theory was that if the seller's paying the commission, then everybody should be representing the seller. That's where the term buyer beware came from, because nobody's representing the buyer. Okay. All right, so we've got the buyer-broker change. Okay, every time the government raises taxes, what are we going to do? I remember, was it in the 80s that they changed the way investors could deduct taxes on investment properties? Everybody's like, oh, that's not even going to be worth it. Are there still investors? Absolutely. Okay. All right. What did we do in the pandemic? During the pandemic, okay, we changed with it. Some things have come out really good. Everybody knows how to use Zoom now. I never even heard of it before. Okay? Everybody knows how to use Zoom. Everybody is using technology in different ways now. So there's different ways that we came out better after that. Okay?
We wash our hands more often.
Yes. All right. So options. We can do this, right? Okay. So in a snowstorm, this is an analogy here. In a snowstorm, a severe snowstorm, a cow will walk away from the storm. What happens when you walk away from the snowstorm is you're in the snowstorm longer, because that's the way the snowstorm is going. And a lot of them end up dying. A buffalo, on the other hand, goes head into the storm, directly into the wind, and he's out of it quicker. Okay? So that's just an analogy for us. Go right into this. Just bulldoze right through it. Okay? Choose your mindset. Are agents value under attack, or is it simply time to adjust our processes, contracts, and our conversations? Okay? So we must know, show, and demonstrate our values to our buyers. Okay? We're now applying for a job to represent our buyers. So if you're applying for a job today that you really wanted, you're going to prepare a resume. You're going to look up interview questions. You're going to review them. You're going to practice them, right? So maybe it's time to do that, okay? Review our processes and the way we're applying for a job. All right. Vanessa, do you want to read this?
Yeah. Articulate the value you deliver to your buying client. Explain the contracts, listing side, buy side, title, escrow regarding settlement. Share your supporting members of the transaction. Share the options of how you get paid a fee for your services.
Okay. So those are all things that we can do to show our value. Okay. You cannot show homes without a signed agreement. We talked about that. Some states have single party show agreements, non-exclusive buyer agreements. Maybe our association will adopt some of those. I don't know. We don't have them now, but they are offered in some states. So maybe keep an eye out for something like that.
Andrew, question
Yes.
for you. You could set your buyer broker for just a one-time showing if you wanted to, couldn't you?
Doesn't say that in there, maybe in the additional comments.
I'm just curious.
Yeah,
There's dates, so you could just do like the days.
yeah, the day you're showing. Yeah, your buyer broker agreements for the day that you're,
Then if you write the offers, it's expired and they no longer have to pay.
There's like a.
Yeah,
thing
that's
that
true.
Says, that it's good for like 90 days of anything you've showed them, I think. Is that
Oh,
what it
okay.
is? I don't know, I might be wrong.
yeah. Read it. I probably need to read it better too.
You put in like a amount of time.
So,
We put in a specific address because like we had a buyer who only wanted to look at one of our listings and didn't want us to represent them on anything else. We put in the address and that kind of covered it.
yeah, yeah. I would imagine there's going to be changes on quite a few of our forms before we go into this. So, all right. So just real quick, I mentioned kind of this before, but this is a slide from an MLS from ARMLS, and on March 13th, just a snapshot, there was 162 listings that offered no compensation. Okay, so if you don't have a buyer broker agreement, and you don't have one, if you have one that shows blank or whatever's offered in the MLS, and this just kind of shows you trends, so over 9,000 listings are listed at 2.5%, 4,800 at 3%, and 1,154 at 2%. Okay, so those are the two biggest. Now, in July, these are all going to be zero. Every single one of these will be zero because there will be no compensation offered for commissions in the MLS. 56 closings from February 18th to March 16th closed for no compensation. Okay, so don't put zero, don't leave it blank, don't say whatever's offered in the MLS. Okay. Intent today is to arm you with some tools. Arm you with tools so that you feel comfortable and confident to go out and have a conversation and be empowered. Be the educator to the unsophisticated home buyer. Choose your mindset. What's your mindset going to be? Processes, they're changing. You have your wants, what you want your processes to be and what they need to be. Contracts change all the time. I don't know how many revisions of contracts and addendums I've been through since 1994. But they change all the time, so they're going to change again. Conversations, this is the most important. Move the conversation forward, okay? Move that forward. Be in control of the conversation. Okay, so working with buyers in 2024. So this was done in 2023 by NAR, a profile of home buyers and sellers. And Jessica, will you read that?
Yeah, the top item buyers want from their agent is help them find the right home to purchase. Buyers also found their agent helped them understand the buying process, pointed out unnoticed features and faults in the property, provided a better list of services, providers, and negotiated better sales contract terms.
Okay. So they believe in us. We need to believe in ourselves. Okay. Okay, what are the do's, the don'ts, and some action items and scripts? Okay, the don'ts. Okay, don't get caught up in the media. You won't be able to control that narrative. Instead, call your sphere of influence. Don't try to figure out ways to sidestep the new rules. Instead, work on the scripts for the new rules. Don't feel this is all doom and gloom. Instead, this is your opportunity to rise, improve your skills and activities. Okay, so the do's. Okay, I'd love to apply for the job of being your realtor. Okay, go through that process. What's that going to look like? How are you going to do that? Okay.
Reminds me of
Yeah, what's his
applying
name?
for a job.
Yeah, I'm
Russell.
applying. Yeah.
Russell's job.
I want to be your realtor.
I'll only charge you 2%.
Okay. Transparency. Again, don't hide from the change. Have confident conversations. Creativity. Okay. So think of the new ways that you can change your business and maybe get business that other buyers can't because you're more skilled. Okay. And work on your relationships. 3 action items. Okay, a 3-part buyer consultation. So buyer consultations. Most agents don't do them. Anytime I train a new agent, I talk to them about doing buyer consultations and how to do them. You're going to need to do a buyer consultation, okay? So the first part, you're going to go over the agency, the compensation agreements, any other kind, the buyer advisory and some things like that. I'll go through that more later. Number 2, talk to them about their financing and needs and wants, okay? Make sure they're getting with Scott to get them pre-approved. Available, number 3, review available homes on the MLS, okay? So maybe have some time to kind of show them how everything works, how a portal works. You're going to set them up on a portal and how that works. Get them set up on homes.com. Homes.com, you can link them, you can invite them to homes.com, and they can see all of the MLS listings on homes.com linked to you. So if they like something, it'll notify you, okay? You'll be their agent on homes.com. Get them from using Zillow, the Zillow app. Just tell them the Zillow app's about 50% accurate, okay? Because it doesn't show pendings. It's only active and closed. So if it's pending, it's not going to show up on there. So it's 50% accurate. So just say, I want you to be able to search like a realtor does with our information that's 100% accurate, okay? So get them on our app, get them away from Zillow. Okay, know the numbers, do the math, buyer payments, cost apps, help them know what they can qualify for. Be a resource, okay? Build your skill at having challenging conversations, okay? The more you think about this, the more you review it in your head, the more you write down your own dialogues. Okay, under this circumstance, I can say this, right? So you memorize a dialogue so that you don't have to say it memorized, right? So you just know it well enough to where you can just spit it off in a natural way. Okay, lean into your relationships. A few scripts here. A text, okay? So, hey, do you have 2 minutes for a quick business call? On the call, what have you heard about this, settlement? What's going on in the real estate industry with commissions? What have you heard? What questions do you have? Okay. Vanessa, will you read this one?
Have you read up on the new changes and agreements for buying a home in 2024? When would be best for us to sit down and get clear on everything you want for your new home? And then can I share a process and show you the changes and agreements? When would you like to get together?
Okay. You guys will get copies of all of these slides, okay? Just some things to keep in mind, ways that we can talk to them. Okay. Jessica, will you read this one?
Step 1, set the appointment with these questions. 1, have you toured any homes with other agents? 2, have you discussed what agency means with any real estate agents because of the new changes? 3, future post-July. Do you have 10 minutes to discuss these themes as we're now required to explain an agency agreement before we tour see homes?
Okay. So it would kind of be nice when everybody has to have a dialogue like that, right? Everybody has to say, that's required by law, okay? I would imagine it'd be a big fine if you don't follow this, or you just don't get paid or something.
What happens if they have signed something with someone else and they don't tell you, and then you sell them a home or something like that?
Yeah, and right now, even if you did that, if somebody had a buyer-broker agreement right now, and you didn't ask them and they had one, it's a violation of the Code of Ethics, okay? So even right now, we need to be having conversations with the buyer. Have you signed anything with another agent? Now, if they lie to you, man, I don't know, because that's hard to prove. Oh, they lied to me. What if they say, no, I didn't, I told her, so.
Could we add that in that contract?
What's that?
Could it be in the agreement or contract?
Like, have you signed any other?
Could that be a line that's added for your agreement?
It's a good idea, like in the
I have not
buyer-broker
signed
agreement,
anything
yeah,
prior.
yeah.
It's also, we should be able to
That
initial
good
that
conversation, if you have anything in writing where you're
Yeah.
texting amongst each other and stuff, so just.
Yep. And I'm sure that when you have them sign this, they're going to remember if they signed it before.
A lot of people don't read what they sign, so they
It's
don't
true.
know what it is,
Yeah.
you know?
It's fitted in there with 5 other things they signed and, Okay. All right. Step 2. Who wrote last? Vanessa, you want to read this?
Sure.
Step 2, call back to confirm the appointment and share that you have X homes to show them and that you'll be emailing those homes along with buyer agency disclosure forms, which includes the agreement allowing me to show you these homes. Step 3, once they've signed, show them the agreed upon homes and then schedule a full buyer consultation.
And this is a script that could be used for online leads or just some type of a referral that you got that you haven't had a chance to spend much time with, right? Okay. Buyer consultation. Know, show, and demonstrate. I take my business seriously and helping you succeed very, very seriously. Can I show you the 90 ways that I help my client identify, negotiate, and ultimately successfully close on their home? Okay. So I've got these 90 ways printed out right here. There's enough for one person to take, and I'll also be emailing you the PDF for that. And I'll also have it in paperless pipeline in the reference tab. Okay. So 90 ways to serve your buyer. Okay. So this list 90 different ways that you serve them. So would this be good for a buyer consultation? I remember talking to a buyer once, just kind of a casual friend, and he was asking me questions about buying a home. And I was just rattling off things that I thought were pretty basic. And at the end of the conversation, he's just like, wow, I had no idea that it was that involved. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought that was all basic stuff. But our buyers and sellers don't do this every day. They don't know all the things. And heaven forbid they go and try and do it themselves. They're not going to probably be happy. Okay? So you can just go through all the things that you do for them. Okay? We also have another one up here, and it kind of encompasses listings, what you do for sellers as well. It's 180 things that you do. So you can get a copy of that as well. Okay? Okay, so 90 things. All right, so know, show, demonstrate. Are you familiar with the 24 different things that I'll be negotiating on your behalf? Let's take a minute to review. Okay, so now you can go over these different things that you negotiate in the process of a contract. Okay, so the purchase price, earnest money, FIRPTA reporting. Okay, so you got to make sure that if it's a seller, they have, a foreign investors, they don't have a social security number, that tax is being withheld. Otherwise, it gets pushed onto the buyer. Okay, IRS is going to get their money some way. Okay, all right. So the BINSR, the seller's response for the BINSR, the HOA fees, home repairs, termite, all these things. Okay, so this will be in the slides as well for you. So we'd love to onboard you as a client and provide these services. So when you're kind of done wrapping up your conversation and that buyer consultation, you can say that. What questions do you have about how we get paid? Okay, just bulldoze. Just go right through it. Don't be afraid of the conversation, because they're going to get used to this and they're going to start helping you negotiate your commission. Okay, you're going to show them the value first. This is the value I provide to my clients. These are the things that I do. Okay, a little bit on the listing side. Okay, so paying concessions to buyer's agent. So you can have a conversation when you bought your home with me. Did you pay me? What are they going to say?
No.
They're going to say no. No, we didn't pay you. Okay. I would highly recommend that you pay that forward and consider offering at least some, if not all, of the buyer's compensation. Advantages to that. You get a larger buyer pool, right? Because remember, the buyer's helping you, what's the word? My brain freeze. Yeah, negotiate your commission, okay? The buyer's helping you negotiate your commission. So they're going to need assistance, or they're going to have to buy another house or pay it themselves. And hopefully they have the money to do that. So you're going to have a larger buyer pool. Buyers are typically don't have much savings, right? They save for the down payment, okay? Save for closing cost, things like that. So they just typically aren't having a whole lot of money. So, and it promotes home ownership, and you have the competitive advantage, okay? So if you have 5 homes that a buyer's looking at that day, they want to see these 5 homes, they're going to see, they're going to know that they need to get their commission compensated. So if they don't get one, well, I like this other one just as good. Maybe they just go to the next house and see if that one will negotiate their concessions, okay? Okay, choose your path. We have 180 days, or 100 days, okay? A little bit over 100 days, okay? Bite the bullet now and start now. Start doing most of these things right now, just kind of get ahead of it. Wait until June and panic and then start. Wait till July and be totally unprepared, okay? Okay, so what will you do? Changes ahead. Just a little bit of housekeeping here on the paperwork. So in Transaction Desk, I created a new template. Okay, it's called Buyer Broker Appointment Docs. Okay, so when you go into that buyer broker appointment or do something over the phone and send these to them, okay, you can just choose that. And then I've got these 6 forms in there. The affiliated business disclosure, might as well just have them sign some docs up front. The buyer advisory, the real estate agency disclosure and election, the wire fraud advisory, the fair housing advisory, and the buyer broker exclusive employment agreement, okay? So just get those signed up front in the initial buyer consultation, and then you have those out of the way. And then when you're writing an offer, it's just purchase contract, HOA, you know, some different basic things, okay? In paperless pipeline, I created a new status called buyer broker initial paperwork, okay? So that's a new status. So you can check that, and then you can just upload those docs, those 6 docs that I was talking about. And then the checklist will be up on the left. Okay, so we can just check off that checklist. So,
So then can that file be converted over into?
yes, good question. Glad you brought that up. So as you can see the name up here, I want you to just put the name and then buyer broker agreement, okay? Now, the system will not allow you to change the name of a file for good reasons. So you're going to need to email me or Katie, gentry.support@gentryaz.com, and have us change the name to the address, okay? So once you have a contract accepted, okay, then we need to change it to the full name. Make sure it's always the full name when you're naming these. Sometimes we just get the house number and street name. It needs to be the full name for the address, and we'll change that for you, okay? Okay, so to help you be successful in doing this and to be applying for a job, you need to have some great resources, okay? And we have some great resources in Scott Smith and Tessie Willis, and we're going to turn some time over to them to help you move forward on this. Scott's going to talk about a commission gap strategy that can help us to make sure we're getting paid and helping our buyer at the same time. So, Scott, I'm going to give you this mic.
Oh, that's the wrong folder. Okay, very sorry. Thank you.
And then just that button right there.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I've met and worked with a lot of you, but there's a lot I have not yet met. So I'm Scott Smith. I work for Barrett Financial. It's nice to see some faces I haven't seen in a while. And there's a lot of ways that we can help you out. And specifically, I'm going to talk about the commission gap strategy, or a way that we can use some financing to protect your commission, or at least to reduce the amount that the buyer needs to come out of the pocket for. Okay, but before I do, I just want to introduce myself real quick. I've done this for 21 years now. I've been working with Andrew and Gentry and Spencer for maybe 10 years, a long time. And about 5 years ago, I switched to the wholesale side of lending, and here's what that means to you. We can shop 143 lenders for the lowest interest rates, the lowest lender fees, and the most amount of loan programs. So we pre-approve a lot of buyers that don't get approved elsewhere. So if I can help you add 1 or 2 extra transactions a year, that could be really valuable. So let's get in specifically to these changes and what's going on. And I think it's great that you guys are here, because obviously we know what the old normal is and we're going to a new normal. And I just talked to a buyer 2 days ago who flew into Texas to look at buying $3.2 million in land. And she's a very successful entrepreneur. She's very busy. And she says to me, Scott, when I was on the way there, I had this most awkward conversation with the buyer's agent who picked me up at the airport, never met her. And she says, hey, I just want you to know, I need to get paid for my work. Sign this. And she was like, what does it say? She's like, it's all new in the industry. We don't even have it figured out yet, but I need you to sign that before we get going. She's like, so I signed it. Like, I flew in for the day. What do you know about that? So I think it's good that we start talking about how to get scripted. And I asked her to send it to me, and it just said, I will be paid for this transaction blank. There was nothing there. It's a $3.2 million transaction. So hopefully the seller's paying something. We'll see. So we've got to get scripted for this now, right? And I love the analogy of the buffalo walking into the storm. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple things. I made some notes because I've been thinking about this ever since the NAR announcement came out on a Friday. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to partner with people to protect their commissions, to make sure buyers can get the houses that they want? So I'm going to share a strategy with you that I've been working on for the last few weeks with some of the highest level thinkers in the industry about how this can look for you. Okay, and I'm checking my notes because I want to make sure I cover everything. So when I do a buyer consultation, I call it a pre-loan application consultation before we pre-approve them. And my goal is they know the down payment, they know the closing costs, they know what payment goes with what price, what they're approved for, what loan program are we doing? Because if I can create clarity and I can create confidence, I can get them more comfortable home shopping, right? And if they're more comfortable, that'll lead to referrals and good transactions. I like to talk about 2 buckets of money buyers need to buy a house. Andrew mentioned it before. We need the down payment and we need a bucket for closing costs. And I'll explain to them, you know, the down payment's 3, 5, 10, 20%, whatever it is. Closing costs go into 3 big categories: lender fees, title fees, third-party fees. Maybe it's an appraisal, tax report, credit, cost of home ownership, taxes, insurance, prorated monthly payment. So 2 buckets of money, down payment and closing costs. Well, now we need to start talking about a 3rd bucket of money, which is where's the commission for your buyer's realtor or your realtor going to come from? Typically, traditionally, that's been paid by the seller. But right now we're going through some flux in the industry. There are some houses out there that are listed that you might like, that you might want to buy for your family, that might not pay your realtor. So we need to talk about a 3rd bucket of money, and that is how are we going to compensate the realtor if the seller won't do it, okay? So, and I think that's something that you guys need to get scripted for, like Andrew's talking about, when you're presenting the buyer-broker agreement. For example, hey, you know, this is what I do for you. These are the things that, you know, we're going to cover. This is what I'm going to negotiate for you, and I get paid X, and I need you to sign this. And I'm hopeful that the seller is going to pay that. But if the seller doesn't pay that, this is what I get paid for my work, and we'll have to find a way for you to come up with that money. I work really closely with a lending partner named Scott Smith, who has some strategies that may be able to help reduce your out-of-pocket costs. And if you're open to it, I'll send a group text and I'll introduce you, okay? And what I want to do is I want to go through some of those strategies for you, okay? So I passed this out here. This is going to be important to know. We think that the concession, when a concession is offered that is going to be used for your commissions, we think the lenders are going to allow that. But there are currently are limits on how much they will allow. It's called an interested party concession. So if they're doing an FHA loan, you can offer up to 6%. But if they're doing a conventional loan and they're putting down less than 10%, you can only offer 3%. So if the buyer needs closing costs and you need the commission to be paid out of that, that's going to be tough, okay? We're going to have some hard conversations around that, okay? When you put down 10%, now you can get a 6% commission or concession from the seller, okay? So we're going to need to get a little better at working on these, and we're going to need to get better at working with your lender and communicating to him or her, hey, here's what my buyer-broker agreement says. Please make sure that that's factored into the conversation that you're having with the buyer so that we're all on the same wavelength. Because in the past, we've been able to say, hey, don't worry about it. I'm free to you. I get paid by the seller. Can't do that now, right? So we got to talk about how are we going to work through this. So all my contact information's on here. My cell phone number's there. If you want to call or text me an intro, that'd be great. I'd love to talk to you about this more in depth. or about how I could help you.
Scott, do you see the VA and the USDA loans eventually changing that rule right now?
That's a great question. So right now, VA and USDA specifically says that the buyers using those loans, they can't pay realtors commissions. The lenders have been amazingly silent on all of these changes. And I don't know if they're waiting to see if the Department of Justice accepts this settlement. So we just don't know. I see tons of conversation online in realtor forums, Facebook, et cetera, saying, hey, the lenders are going to have to start financing our commissions. It's radio silence on that. I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, I would love that. That would be fantastic. But what we're going to look at is we're going to look at a strategy where if they're making a 10% or more down payment, how we can functionally adjust the financing to get your commission. Okay? So we're hopeful. We don't know yet, Stephanie. Okay? Okay. So this is something I can email you, I can walk you through. And what I want to do is I want to just walk you through how we've done real estate and gotten commission paid in the past. Here's how we could do it if we did not adjust the strategy and the seller was not paying a commission. Here's how we could do it by fitting it in the transaction. And then here's another solution. Okay? And what I'd really like to do is walk through all of this and then tackle questions at the end. I reviewed this with one of my really good realtor friends who's a pretty decent producer before I came here, and she had tons of good questions. And we went all through it one time, and I said, okay, let me do it again and hold your questions to the end. And she's like, okay, you got most of the questions as we went through. Okay? So what we're showing here is on the left, a $500,000 house, 20% down. Okay, you got a monthly payment of $26.28 for principal and interest. And they would need, with 20% down and closing costs, about $109,600 in closing costs, or cash to close. It's cash to close, down payment, and closing costs, 2 buckets of money. But so that's assuming your commission gets paid the traditional way, 3% paid by the seller, it's easy. In this next column, let's say that this house that they fell in love with for $500,000 pays 0 commission, or there's a 2% gap, whatever it is. So maybe your buyer broker says you're working for 2%, maybe it says you're working for 3 and they're paying 1. Whatever it is, I'm showing a 2% gap between what you've agreed on with your buyer broker and what the seller's paying. We're going to call that the commission gap. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So if they do a $500,000 house, 20% down, got the same principal and interest payment, got the same closing costs, but now they need $10,000 or 2% to pay the buyer broker. So now they need $119,600. What if they don't have that? What if they just barely have the 20% to get into the house? So now you've got to figure out, okay, do you have to beg, borrow, and steal to come up with 10 grand to pay me? Do I have to show you a lot more houses? Like, we would love to sell them that house, right? Wrap it up, find a way to get paid. So I'm going to show you how we could do that. So again, in column 1, this is the old way, sellers paying the commission. Column 2, there's a 2% commission gap, and they need an extra 10 grand cash at closing. Okay, column 3, how about if we go in and we say, okay, we've got a $10,000 commission gap between what you're paying as a seller and what my buyer is going to pay me. So I want to work it into the transaction. I want to raise the price to $510,000, and I want a 2% concession to my buyer to offset their closing costs to allow that buyer to pay my $10,000 commission. And we're going to work it into the transaction. I know you're going to say, what if the house doesn't appraise? We're going to look at that next, okay? So now we've raised the price to $510,000, okay? The payment has come up to $26.80. It's come up by $52 a month, okay? But the closing costs stay the same, and he doesn't need this $10,000 to pay your commission. We've worked it into the transaction, and at the end, they need $111,600 cash to close with 20% down if it appraises for $510,000, okay? So they're paying an extra $52 a month to work this $10,000 into the transaction, and their cash to close, instead of going up by 10 grand, it goes up by $2,000 compared to the old way because we're financing 80% of the transaction. That make sense to everybody? So you get your $10,000, it's worked into the transaction. Buyer's essentially financing it. This is an important distinction because what I'm hearing online and talking to my realtor friends, partners, they're saying the lenders are going to have to change and finance the commissions. They're not talking about doing that. Like, we'd all love that, but this is a way that we can adjust the financing strategy. And this works with people putting 10% down or more. People putting down 5% or less, that's going to be a challenge. We're going to have some hard conversations there. Okay? So, this is how we work into the transaction, 510, as a purchase price. Now, let's say it appraises for 500. You're like, oh shoot, what are we going to do? Well, you'll go back, you'll negotiate down to $500,000, and now, instead of the client putting down 20% down payment or $100,000, if you look up top, we're going to have them put down 18.4%. Okay? And what that does is they need less money for the down payment. They pick up mortgage insurance of $59. Okay? Payment again goes up by $52. But look at this. They need $111,632. So opposed to the traditional way, you still only need $2,000 more. Got the payment going up by about $52. We functionally worked it into the transaction. So if you're having the conversation right up front with your client, like, hey, I'm going to get paid, for example, 3% per this buyer broker. If the seller's not paying it, you're going to have to go ahead and find a way to pay it. So if you can work with me or a lending partner like me who can explain this to your client and show it to them, then we can create some confidence that hopefully we can reduce the burden for the buyer to come out of pocket for that. And you can get them the house they want. Okay? Be right there. So does this make sense before I grab your question? Did I explain that well? Okay, yeah, what's your question? It's Melissa, right?
Yes. I mean, I can't see it really well.
I'll actually, if you'll send me a text or an email, I'll send it to you.
But what I'm asking is in the last column, okay, now they have to pay mortgage insurance, correct?
Yes.
Which is 59,
Yes,
and then their payment's still going up 52.
yes.
Okay, so basically it's going to cost them out of pocket $100 a month more.
That's
They still
actually,
get the house if they want.
it's actually all worked in because we lowered the down payment. It's about $52 a month, okay? And it's actually worth noting, so I'm really glad you said that. Mortgage insurance falls off automatically when you've got 22% equity in the house.
So, yeah, appreciative gain, you could end up actually removing that.
Yeah, so once they've made enough payments, they won't go off of appreciation to remove it, but once they, at least not in the first few years, but once they've made enough payments that they've paid an extra 4% in principal, the mortgage insurance will roll off automatically. Okay? What do you guys think about this?
You said we were able to text you if you wanted this slide?
Yeah, you can text me or email me.
Everybody signed in with their email,
Yeah.
so I'll just give you a copy of that.
Oh, that'd be great, and then I can send it out to everybody?
Do you think when they present to the Department of Justice, they'll see any of this matched?
I can't imagine I come on their radar, at least I hope not.
Well, I wonder if somebody that actually works with the NAR has knowledge of mortgage loans to make them realize that it's a cost to the buyer if they make these changes.
I think there's not been enough conversation there, right? Like, the people that get hurt are the buyers that are the underserved buyers, the people with less money, the people with money, like, this will be fine for them. The institutions, the builders, it's gonna be fantastic for them. So I think there's some unintended consequences.
I think there's just a little bit of issue for these VA buyers and stuff like that.
Oh, for sure.
For sure, people are gonna be, I hate to say discrimination and everything, but there, you know, we primarily are sellers and stuff, but that's gonna,
Yeah,
that concerns me a little bit.
I think we're all concerned with that, right? So this is a little bit about the strategy, right? And we want to get our buyers invested in making sure we get paid early on in the transaction, right? Like, we've talked about how to justify your worth, how to show them the 90 or the 180 things that you're doing for them. So we've got to show them, hey, we've got different options. Now, if they're doing 5% down payment, or they're doing FHA, VA, USDA, gonna have to have some hard conversations because we can't necessarily work it into the financing like that. Like, we could go ahead and get, you know, on that other slide, we can get like a 6% concession on FHA, but the buyer can't spend all that, right? So we really can only get enough concession that it will offset the buyer's closing costs, and that frees up that money to go to you.
I
Okay?
feel like I'm gonna be embarrassed to ask this question, so I'm so sorry.
Somebody must be thinking of it, so go ahead.
No, you probably already said it, but, so we're talking about, obviously, if the seller's not even offering the buyer agent commission.
Or not offering enough.
Yeah. But my question is, because I just dealt with this with another transaction, is even if they are, and the way it's structured now, that's going to come off that total percent for the concessions now, is that correct or no? Like if they're offering to cover the buyer agent fees, because it's being paid differently, is that now like, you know, say they're the 10% and they only get 3% total, but they needed closing costs help or whatever? Am I making any sense with my question?
I think so. I think what
Like,
you're
is that all
asking.
gonna, like, say the buyer agent fees is 3%, and they also were helping with the closing costs, but now they're gonna be over that 3% total, or
We-
does that not count?
That's a really good point. Does everybody understand what she's asking? Like,
Because I just had a buyer that.
the short answer is we don't know. We got to figure that out.
Restate the question, just so
Yeah,
everybody-
that
So
makes sense.
I think the question is, let's say they're going to pay 3% towards the buyer's agent, just like we used to see regularly, and the buyer needs 3% concession. If that's over the concession allowed or the interested party contribution that I showed on the first chart, how does that look? The short answer is we don't know, because right now the commission is really outside of the loan. And moving forward, one of the changes that Andrew pointed out is in July, there's not going to be a commission. There'll be concessions.
Oh, so
right.
we still don't even know what that will.
I think we're trying to figure out exactly how it plays into the lending side
Okay.
and what the lenders are going to allow. And we don't know. And when I say we don't know, like I work with 143 lenders. It's radio silence. Nobody's talking about it.
What is the concession limit right now on the percentage? Is it by loan or is it general?
It's by loan type, and I think I can go back to it. So this, actually, this that I handed out breaks it out. So I wanted you to have it. What's your name?
Armando.
Armando. So you've got this. It's all listed there.
Okay.
But like this is lender speak, and I think one of the takeaways, if I was in your shoes, is like, hey, I really need a lender I can partner with who can help me navigate this, because it's going to change in real
Let me hand you
time.
the phone. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and again, I think you're going to need to get comfortable explaining to people like, hey, you know, the way things have worked in the past is influx. It's changing, right? You know, I get paid X percent. This is the value I bring to you. I need you to sign this agreement so I can show you homes. If the seller's not paying this, you need to be prepared to pay me this. And I work really closely with the lender, and I think that we could probably minimize your out-of-pocket expense with that. And are you okay if I do a group text introduction? And he or she can talk to you about how that looks. Like that's a script we're going to need to get good with, or something similar. Yeah, Denise.
So do y'all have a clause that you could put on page 8 that says concessions to be blah, 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 you know, include but not limited to blah, 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 and commissions?
I think,
As approved by the lender?
I don't know yet.
Yeah,
We don't know
they'll
yet.
be changing the contract. So that'll become more clear, but you literally can negotiate, it's not a dirty word, it just can't be in the MLS. You can negotiate commissions in the contract, okay?
But that used to be a no-no, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
And part of the reason they said no is because the contract's between buyer and seller, so at any point they could write an addendum and just remove contract, or remove commissions,
Right.
right? So that was part of the thing, is just like, don't put it in the contract, buyer and seller get together, do an addendum and remove it. So whereas it's going through the MLS, it was protected, you know, because the listing agreement was part of, you know, you could put whatever's in the listing agreement in the MLS, and this is what we're, you know, affordably asking, or offering.
So one of the things that I see might be an issue is like what you were saying, if the loan program's only allowing 3%, but the seller's willing to pay 3%, the wording might have to change from seller concessions to seller something else, because that's going to hurt a lot of buyers out in the market.
One of the conversations that probably needs to change is we're used to just saying, well, if you can get your down payment, I can get your closing costs negotiated.
Right.
We're probably just gonna need to forget that conversation in most cases. FHA, yeah, you can still do it, but in general, I wouldn't lead with that conversation, because that compensation is gonna need to go towards your commission so that you can help them through a difficult process.
I think Scott's right in that if you have them talk to him first, to get them pre-qualified so
Yeah,
that he knows what to
absolutely.
tell you to tell the seller that you need
Yep.
before you actually make the commitment.
It's about those 3 buckets of money, right? Like we've always talked about down payment and closing costs. Now we're talking about commission gap or paying the buyer's agent. I know you had a question. I know you do. Go ahead.
Sorry, it was just a follow-up to what you said is there's not really covering that right now. So with the situation I was in with a buyer that was under 10%, and as a friend, I was saying, I'll give you my 2% of my commission towards your closing deal. But they also had concessions for closing from Ashton Woods. And so they could not use my full contribution because of that percentage. So should we basically, is what you're saying, because I heard you kept saying, basically, it's a hard conversation if they're under 10%.
Yeah.
Basically, we plan on, it sounds like either or right now as it stands, correct? Like, you're either helping with closing costs or the buyer's agent.
Yes, correct. There could be a blend depending on like what you're charging on your buyer broker agreement and what their closing costs are. You know, like if you're only charging 2 and they're paying 3, then we could split it up, right? 2 for you, 1 for the closing costs. So it's going to vary very much case by case because you might have a buyer broker agreement for 3 and they might have a buyer broker agreement for 1.5 and you know, it might be different for $1 million house than it is for a $300,000 house. So it's going to be very much case by case. I think it's super important to be partnered with a lender who can help you navigate this and that you have conversations with your lender like, hey, I'm referring this buyer to you. My buyer broker agreement's going to be X. Okay, that's going to be important. So I had a question there and then I'll get you, Laura.
Affects you, but it's a question for him. Back in the day in 2000 when I started, we couldn't say, hey, here's my favorite lender who does this great job and works through down or concessions. When we had like home inspectors, you had like 3 you're supposed to give them. Insurance agents, you're supposed to give 3. Well, now it sounds like he's saying, partner with me and we're done. Do we still need to give multiple choices
the thing.
here?
The reason you would give multiple home inspectors, for example, is that if a home inspector messed up, there, you know, the likelihood of you getting sued as part of that is less, right? Because it just lessens the liability. Hey, here's, well, I gave you 3 options or whatever, okay? So, but a lender, I mean, I think it's a little bit different. I mean, sure, can a lender mess up here and there? I mean,
it's happened.
I mean, especially if, you know, you do one of these online lenders, right? But at the same time, I have a lot of confidence in Scott. And for example, like maybe you use Stratton Home Inspections a lot, and you have a lot of confidence. I mean, it's like you're also the professional. It's just like, hey, I have a lot of confidence in these people. You can use any home inspector you want, any lender you want. I'm just telling you, I have some confidence in this person. They've done a good job for me, and they can explain things really well. Not every loan officer can, or not, you know, whatever. So you're saying, you never say you have to use this one if you're going to use me. As long as you don't say that, you're just kind of guiding them. Hey, I would suggest, you know, this would be a good move for you. I've had success with them in the past.
He's also held to a lot higher standard, I think, too,
Yeah.
because of the banking
And I want to keep answering questions. I also want to have time for tests. I got one more concept I want to cover, and then I can hang out. I can take questions. The concept I want to cover is the value of owning a house. And I'm going to come right back to that. But, you know, like when I work with my financial planner, there's been some investments I've made where he gets 7% right off the top. So like I invest $100,000. He's real clear, hey, there's a 7% load charge for this. So I give him $100,000. I'm investing $93,000, okay? Even though it cost me $100,000. And nobody's talking about that, right? Like we're under attack for 6% commissions, which we know is closer to 2.5%, right? That you're sharing with the broker and your expenses. So I think we need to do a better job of helping people understand why housing is a foundation of wealth. This is an investment in you, your future, housing stability, okay? And it's a foundation for building wealth. And we're not going to promise that it's going to go through the roof, but we can say, look, historically, here's what's happened. So part of what I've done in my buyer presentation, which I've really upgraded in the last year, the other reason I've upgraded is because I've got to help clients get comfortable, you know, like a Tyler LeBaron going from $1,200 a month to $2,800 a month. You know, and we've got to find ways to help them see why that makes sense.
Hey, Scott,
And then I'm trying to help them understand the difference in the loans and which has the lowest cost over time. But here's what I want to share with you. So one of the things I'm sharing in the buyer consultation as it goes to helping people understand the value of investment is, hey, if you buy a $500,000 house in the zip code in Gilbert and you just get the historical price appreciation that we've got in the last 50 years, that includes the housing crash and the COVID boom, here is what that house is going to look like for you over time. Your $510,000 house in this example, after 10 years, will be worth $771,000. That's a huge run-up. I mean, that's 50% price improvement or appreciation, and that's not the only way you're going to build equity in this house. So just by making the regular down payment, the last example was 10 years, this is 7. In 7 years, bless you, you're going to pay $36,125 to principal just making your minimum payment, okay? And if you get the historic price appreciation, you'd be up $177,374 in 7 years. And you made a down payment of $100,000. So 7 years from now, if you just get the historic appreciation we've seen, you'd have $313,499 in equity. So that's why engaging in this process, buying a house, securing your payment is so crucial to your future building wealth and securing a home for your family. Because I don't think we've done a good job bringing that message to people in the marketplace. Is this something you've talked to buyers about and laid out for them in the past? You have?
Absolutely.
Good.
I work mostly with investors is where I use it, and it works really well.
That's the interest rate off.
So this is something I'm trying to bring to everybody, okay? So if you guys have some buyers that I can help with that, I would love to do that. You've got my information. It's on that handout, and I'll send out the slides, okay? Lori, do you still have a question?
Oh, my question was, kind of for all of you, mainly Andrew, when I was in my real estate classes, the continuing ed, they mentioned that it's already off the MLS as far as the buyer broker percentage and that. I haven't looked, I mean, is it? Is it? Oh, okay, then, like I said, it was, when I was taking them a couple weeks ago, they weren't saying much, but they said it was off already, so that's what I was just wondering if people.
No, not yet.
So, would you say as far as on a buyer broker agreement?
Toss.
As far as, you can't, if you have to say a specific amount, would you, you can't say, hey, you'll pay the difference if the seller doesn't want, or doesn't cover that much? You can't say the.
Well, kind of like what we said in the beginning, so if you put 3 and you can only get negotiated 2, I would imagine you can amend a contract and you can say, I'm agreeing now to lower it to 2, you know.
Yeah.
Somehow I feel like I received messaging in my CE courses, or I don't know, that we're not supposed to talk about real estate in terms of investments, because like we're not investment professionals. Is that correct?
Any advice like that would be to keep you out of a lawsuit, right? You know, that you're overstepping your bounds, you're going outside your area of expertise.
So you can do it if you disclaim that, or no?
Well, like, I know some agents that they do investments all the time. And so giving your advice, if you've had some success doing that, you probably should just say, I can't guarantee this will work for you, but it has worked for me, right? So you just gotta be careful on the way you word things.
Or you can send them to me, and I can show them. Or somebody who's working with software like that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so careful to say, hey, this is historical price appreciation. It includes the crash. It includes the COVID boom. Both of those feel like once in a lifetime events. And when you net through all that, it's like 4.7%, 4.8%, 4.6, depends on the zip code.
Market disclosure,
new home
advisory.
sales? Are the builders gonna be able to disclose what they're offering
Yeah,
to
the Trump.
buyers agents?
The builders that I've talked to are very excited about this, just so you.
Oh,
What's
really?
that?
Yeah, the builders are not worried about this, my
Builders
connections
do
with the
good.
builders.
So they just think they're gonna stop offering concessions
Well,
altogether?
they just think that it might be an easier route they're gonna like set a set amount, And then this way, it takes that off your plate of you having to negotiate with the seller and everything. And people are gonna be like, oh, they're gonna come to us. They know they're not gonna have to negotiate. They're gonna see it all laid out.
So they're still planning to give it to the buyer's agent.
So
They
it
just-
could be
that would give them a
something-
leg
Three
up.
builders that I have to.
Yeah, so it could be something like right now they offer, like say $5,000 in seller concessions if you use this lender, right? So it might just be, we offer $10,000 in concessions. And then, you know, okay, if you want an agent, then, you know, how much do they want of that? Maybe it's something like that.
Sellers aren't gonna just wake up one day and stop offering, like, I mean,
I don't have
all
a
my
single
listing
seller right
agreements
now.
are gonna still say
Especially with 70
6%
people.
or 5.5% or whatever I want it to be, like, I mean, I don't know.
Are sellers gonna be able to put on the listing still, like they can put now, I'm willing to give 5,000 concessions, and they could say, like in the remarks
I would
section,
imagine the MLS now is gonna have a field for
Field
seller
for it.
concessions.
Yes.
It'll
You
just say,
cannot say
you know,
what
this much.
concessions.
You
Yeah.
can say concessions though, but if we can offer on our website a compensation,
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with the concessions, right?
Yeah.
So
Or social
that's the other part to this that I guess my mind has kind of stewed around is you can go to an agent and say, hey, I have a VA buyer, you need to offer me compensation if you want, because concessions aren't gonna do it.
And will that still be on the title sheet then as compensation?
On the
not
title,
as
but not on the
concession?
contract.
Right.
Which is again, going back to, we're not gonna negotiate our commissions on the contract.
Right.
We're gonna negotiate the concessions. So
You have a
concessions
separate
and commissions
agreement
is two different
as far as
things.
compensation.
So will that be a signed agreement then with somebody, or what are we talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, that we don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we just don't know those kind of details yet, but
Doesn't
yeah.
that still count with the, like, the
Interested party
total interested
concessions.
party though? So I just feel
We
like
think
this
it's going to.
overall affects, you have to screen the quality of your buyer too.
Yes.
Because now, people that were already struggling to even get in a home with down payment and needing help with closing costs do not have all the funds now.
And they're the ones that need the most protections. It
Yes,
hurts those
exactly.
entry-level buyers.
It is
It does.
harder to get in now, period.
Yes.
Okay, let's finish up with Tessie. and then-
I'll try and keep it short and sweet.
We're
But
gonna have Tessie go through some things right now, and then we'll have.
we are going to do a separate, another session that's going to be a little bit more focused on the listing side of things, because there's definitely a lot of concern as far as how are we going to address this from a listing standpoint as well, so we can still encourage the same practices moving forward. And that's something Andrew has planned for you guys. We don't have a date set yet, but it is something we've been discussing. So this was kind of a little bit more focused on the buyer end, the communicating, the understanding and portraying yourself properly with your unique value proposition, that sort of thing, and just kind of getting a general idea of what we do know as of right now, because even though these are supposed to go in place in July, the lawsuit's not even going to be finished until, what are they predicting, November? So the practices, yeah, they're finalizing things, but the practices will take place prior to them even finalizing things within this suit. So
What's that?
When do they present to the DOJ to approve the settlement? That could take, I mean,
They anticipate having court approval in 1 to 3 months.
on a positive note, I actually see this as kind of like an opportunity for you guys when it comes to buyers, because there's a lot of agents out there I hear talking about how they're only going to focus on listings. If you get good at talking to buyers,
you got the market corner.
you've got the market cornered. So take advantage of it. Practice now, get good at it now, because there's a lot of other people, your analogy with the bison, that they're just like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on listings and I'm not going to worry about this, and then it's one less thing I have to address or change in my practice. You guys have that much more opportunity out there. The way I see it, if you are sitting down with a buyer to even present yourself to them, you already know, they need you. So you're already a foot in the door. You just have to get that other foot in the door. Funny analogy, but you just have to get that other foot in the door to really kind of showcase what separates you from any other agents out there and why you're beneficial to them, okay? Something to think about, and I think a lot of professionals do this in their industry, and you brought up earlier even, like when you were listing off to your friend all the things you do, and he was like, oh wow, you do that much? They don't do this every single day for a living, right? We don't know what a attorney does, the ins and outs, the behind the scenes stuff. They don't necessarily tell you all of that stuff. But when they're trying to earn your business, They're letting you know all the pain points and all the pleasure points. How am I going to make this easier? And what are you going to save yourself on by hiring me? These are all the things that I'm going to help you out with, right? So this is the time where we start defining our roles in everything that we do. Everything that you guys are providing to your buyers and sellers. And I say both because even when you're, defining what you do for your sellers, in essence, and talking to them about offering those concessions, you're also defending your case when you go to help them buy a house as well too, right? So it's going to work on both ways, but I don't want to go too much into that because we have a whole nother session on that. But I think it's easy for us to just handle things for the buyers and sellers. We all do it in our professions. You're trying to not let them know the stresses that are going on behind the scenes, the fears, the complications, all the things. You just handle it. So they don't know what you guys do. Now it's time to actually share all the things that you guys are doing on a day-to-day basis. So defining your role in this industry, defining your role on how you help them, right? Like I said, 1 foot in the door already. If you're sitting down talking to them, they already know you need them. You're just now telling them why they want you, why they want to hire you, right? And you're defending the amount that you're asking to be paid. I would recommend going in already knowing what your worth is, whether that's a flat rate or a percentage, whichever direction you want to take it. And then that way you already have your script prepared to talk to them. So it's not going in there and waiting to decide and making it a negotiation with them. And if you can't negotiate what your value is with them, how are you going to negotiate for them with a seller and with a seller's agent? So you're going to get good at communicating. You're going to get good at sharing. Those are ultimately the things I'm kind of wanting to go over with you guys. And that's where there's the papers that we've got printed out for you, the 90 ways and the 180 plus things realtors do. That'll help you guys get started. So my role in helping with this is helping with this. If you need to sit down and define what your buyer presentation looks like, go over different objectives, practice your scripts, get comfortable with the conversations, okay? Telling stories, telling testimonials, sharing reviews, sharing what your work ethic is, everything that you're doing, right? And when I say with the buyer, I'm also meaning with the masses. It's been brought up the concern of how do we debunk some of these horrible headlines that are out there that are misleading, that are confusing. You are the way that's going to take place, especially when it comes to your sphere. So staying in touch with your sphere of influence in any method possible. If someone has a question, chances are a lot of other people do as well. So you might as well put it out there. Okay. I think now is going to be a really important time to focus on reviews and getting those testimonials. So whatever platform you're using or determining what platform you want to use is going to be really important, because when you are meeting with those buyers, those are things you're going to want to show with them. This is someone who says, I was worth every penny. These are the reasons why I was worth every penny. I'm not telling you, they're telling you, right? So start now on getting those reviews. Start now on getting those testimonials, whether they're video testimonials or you're having them collected on Google My Business. I don't care where you get your reviews and your testimonials, but start getting them so then you can share them during the presentation, and then also again, kind of with the masses, okay? A hard one for a lot of people is bragging about yourself. Get comfortable bragging about yourself. You have to be. You have to be proud of what you do, and you have to know that what you're bringing to the table is worth every penny you're asking for that. If you're not, go to a counselor. I don't know, but you're going to have to learn how to get comfortable saying, I'm good at my job, and this is why you need to hire me. This is my pitch. These are my reasonings. These are the things I'm going to do for you. I mentioned pain and pleasure. Everyone makes a choice based on pain or pleasure. Is it going to benefit them, or are they avoiding pain? One or the other. So get comfortable being confident and bragging about yourself. And then as far as platforms, that's something I can help you guys out with, is figuring out where the best platform is for you guys to start collecting all of this stuff. And then be their media. And sorry if I'm bouncing around a little bit. Be their media, address all the issues, and put it out there. Whether you're doing it by mailing something like a newsletter to them, or you're sending them text messages, or you're making a phone call, or you're putting videos out on YouTube, or you're putting your videos out there in forms of reels on Instagram. Either way, get out there and address these myths. Get out there and address and debunk what the media is putting in front of them, right? You're in front of them on social media, so stay in front of them in that platform and any other platform you can to be in touch with them. Share everything you know to everyone you know, basically. So, because, I mean, obviously if you don't, they're just gonna be that much more misinformed and more confused. And at the end of the day, when you go to meet with someone or you do have to address it, you're gonna have that many more objectives that you're gonna have to face. But if you get in front of it and you share everything, then when you get that appointment, you already know, again, they're that much more serious, right? When you go look for a car, the car salesman, he already knows you're there looking for a car. You're in the building, right? You're walking around the lot. They know that's what you're there for. Now they just need to help you finish the process. So obviously communication is key with addressing the myths. Ask what they know. Ask what they don't know, which I think you brought up earlier too. And then also let them know what's actually different and what's not. This is the same backyard. It's just a slightly different landscape. But at the end of the day, it's still the same backyard. We're still helping people buy and sell houses. We're just having a slightly different conversation prior to showing a house and a slightly different conversation with the seller to help defend and discuss putting that concession in there. And the better job we do at that, the less you guys are going to be dealing with out in the field. The less negotiation, the less haggling that you guys are going to be dealing with the field. If everyone's kind of, as a collective in this industry, is on the same page of still trying to keep that consistent way of doing things, it's just going to make the change that much easier for you guys to maneuver through and not feel so much like a change. And then something else to keep in mind, you said earlier, you're like, oh, I might be the only one that has this question. There's never just one person that has a question. If it's something someone asks you or you feel like someone's uneducated in, I'm sure there's lots of other people. So make sure that you're putting it out there. So at the end of the day, share everywhere with everyone. Share on video, share in pictures, share in text message, share on all the social platforms, whichever ones you guys are on. Share in mailers, not just in your presentations. Just the more you guys can put stuff out there that informs people, the better. And it's keeping you in front of them. So it's kind of like a win-win. You're out there putting content, which most agents don't really know what to put out there. I brought some buyer-seller guides that also defines the process. One thing it shows is how complicated the process can be on both the buyer and seller end. That book is full of content and ideas and ways that you can educate your buyers and sellers and things that you guys can be putting out there as well. But and again, that's where I can help you guys, is with just kind of putting all of this stuff together, practicing different scripts for what you want to put out there, that sort of thing. So I don't think it has to be as scary as some agents are putting out there. I know obviously forms are changing a little bit and stuff like that, but from a communication standpoint, I mean, it's just, if you just change your mindset, it's just a few tweaks and that's it. If we don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, right? So I don't know. That's pretty much it. I just want to make sure everyone's communicating and know that I'm here to help with ironing out some of those details and putting stuff out there in the ways that we need to, whether we need to formulate things in design or we just need to formulate and articulate the proper way of putting things out there. I'm here to help with all that stuff. So, yep, so that's my role. And that's pretty much it, because I know we're probably a little bit past your planned time. So, but yeah, did anyone have any questions for me? I'm a little bit different of a position than where Andrew and Scott sit, but
a great partner. You need great partners to show your value. And, you know, one of these booklets should accompany you in your buyer consultation and even your seller consultation as you go over things and have value to leave with them and talk to them and discuss with them. So is there a copy of the purchase contract in there?
There is, in the back of it.
Yeah.
So there's enough books here for everyone to take one with you. We can brand these to you. So even though you've got me on there at the moment, when we want to create them for you, we'll have them branded to you. We like everything to be branded to you. When you go see your buyers and sellers, we want them to see your face, not ours and not mine. But yeah, lots of information in there going over, you know, ways to take title, but it goes in there about the buying process and the selling process and that sort of thing. So, but But yeah, don't be afraid to share with people like what your struggles are, because that leads to sharing with them your solutions or how you worked your clients through those things or how you navigated a process, because that in and of itself defines the importance of hiring you. Because the list of things that you do when you negotiate, things aren't always perfect, but a lot of times you don't let your buyers and sellers see that. It's time to, I think, let them see it. I think it's time to let them see the truth about all of it. Start bragging.
Do you see a potential uptick in dual agency now? Because buyers just.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Here's my take. So some brokers don't even allow dual agency. Some states don't allow dual agency. So to me, if I'm, number one, I want to make sure everybody understands. If you own the home, have a financial interest in the home, or are closely related to the seller, you cannot do dual agency. It's not covered by E&O. No court in the nation will believe if something went wrong that you did it equally. Okay? So you got to be very careful on that. So I want to point that out. Number two, I would just have them go unrepresented. Just
refer them to someone and collect
yeah,
that
refer
referral
them
fee.
to somebody, get them another agent.
So unrepresented though, but then you couldn't show them the house because you don't have a buyer broker with them. Or how does
Okay,
that
so
work?
you're saying like you just got a listing. And
They called on the sign.
And they call on the sign,
Right.
okay. Yeah, I would probably, in many circumstances, say, well, if you want me to be your agent, before you even show my house or have the ability to show you any others, we need to sign a buyer broker agreement. And then that way you're having a conversation with them to not only maybe they don't end up getting your house, but now you have a buyer that you can show other houses to. And it's just every agent.
No, I'm saying, a lot of the buyers that I've talked to since this all came out are like, well, then why do we even need a realtor now? Why don't we just call off the sign and go buy the house directly from them? And we don't have to worry about paying you because their seller's paying them, and, we can just go through the process that way.
Here's my point on that. Here's what I wanted to get to.
That's where you're going to define your role.
If your seller says, I do not want to pay extra commission for a buyer's agent, I would never, ever, ever do a dual agency. Because that's twice the work for the same amount of money. So I would always say, well, okay, if somebody calls on your sign, I can't represent them either because I have no skin in the game. I'm not.
But overall, the seller wants the house sold.
So in that case, I would just say, well, I can help them, I can send them a contract, but I'm not representing them. They can go, and so in paperless pipeline, in the reference tab, there is a document, broker forms, called unrepresented seller, right? And it goes through all these disclosures on how they understand they're not represented, even though it'd be better for them if they were. but they're
Arrange
not
your own
represented.
inspections, arrange your own
And
stuff,
then,
arrange your own
on the
escrow.
contract, on the blank lines, put buyer understands they're unrepresented by a real estate agent in this transaction. And then on the last page where it says buyer's agent, again, right, unrepresented. So it needs to be like completely clear they're unrepresented. There's no question by anybody.
I think until the market resets, you're gonna see a lot more uptick of that.
Yeah.
Until
But
people
if I've got a
realize
seller not willing to pay buyer commission, I would never say, oh yeah, I'll be able to dual agent.
Yeah.
Just be like, well, and you can come up with.
We are
ways
going
of
to see that,
explaining.
especially people that think they're tech savvy.
Absolutely.
They are going to come in represented, and I think that's where, to his point, expressing to them, like, yeah, you can come see the property, but I'm not representing you. We don't have a buyer broker agreement. I'm not representing you. We can show you the property. And if you make an offer, you're doing so with your own knowledge that you're unrepresented. But if you want me to refer you to one of my colleagues, happy to do so, that can represent you through the process. This is where it behooves you to have the representation, because once in contract, they can't bring an agent in.
But can we show them the
And
house without a buyer broker?
You can,
Even if we have
because
the listing?
you're showing your listing.
Okay.
You're not showing the property to the buyer.
Okay.
So that's where it differentiates. So now there's obviously multiple contracts, right, involved. But yeah, so you can absolutely show it to the buyer who's coming in unrepresented. But I would definitely let them know, like, why it benefits them to have somebody come in, because they can easily come in and put that offer. If your seller does have, say, 3% concessions, and the buyer comes in unrepresented, they could use that 3% concessions however they want to. They decided to use it towards the house instead of being represented. But there's a good possibility during the transaction, they're gonna go, oh shit, excuse my language, but they're gonna realize why they needed a realtor to come in and, and help them navigate the process.
Sure. And be careful. You've probably heard the term in CE classes and maybe when you got your license of implied agency, right? So it needs to be very clear. Anytime they're asking you a question as an unrepresented buyer, I don't represent you. That's a good question. Maybe you can answer it. Maybe you can't. Yeah, exactly.
Who they'll
You
pay
can
a
say,
fee to, will they
you know
not?
what? Maybe I can't advise you on that. Maybe check with the title company or an attorney.
Well, and even the title company is limited on how we can advise buyers and
Yeah.
sellers and even the agents as well. We have to be very careful
Pass
because
the buck.
we're
Let them
supposed
pass
to
the
be.
buck.
Yeah, because and we'll tell them the same thing. We're a neutral third party,
Yeah.
and we have to play fair.
So I have a friend that thinks this is going to bring about agents that will work just for writing contracts. and
Yeah, I was gonna
representing
just ask
them.
that same question.
Yeah, like they just
Like
charge
an attorney.
$500 to
Call
write.
me, I'll
And
write
that's
your
the way it
purchase
is in
contract for
Australia and New
$1,000
Zealand.
fee.
So the buyer's not represented in Australia and New Zealand. They go
Yeah.
to the listing agent to see the home, and then they go to an attorney and just pay a
Yeah,
flat fee to
flat
write the
fee.
contract.
Flat fee attorney, write
Yeah.
your contract.
But that's
And
still a
that-
buyer broker agreement, and that's still something that's specifically stated, right? So once you enter into that, if you are going to just represent them in just writing the contract, and that's what you put in there, that it's the flat $500 fee to write the contract, I would be specific if I was doing that. That's simply what it is. Once I write the contract, it's hands off.
Yeah, I don't represent
This
you
is, I do
anymore.
not
I have
represent
no
you anymore.
representation.
They would probably need to have
But will that-
another, they'd
will that
probably have to have
happen?
another disclosure form, because the
Yeah.
agency itself says you're a fiduciary. A fiduciary doesn't just write a contract.
There you go.
We're
Right.
not allowed, we're not allowed to be paid for paperwork, right?
If you have agency, you have to have agency. You have to have an agency agreement, and then you can get paid for something. But if you don't represent one party or the other in a transaction, you cannot take a fee. Okay?
Oh, so then no one can write a contract.
If they have an agency agreement and they're the agent of
Real estate
record on
attorney
the
would have it.
transaction,
Yeah, real estate.
they could
attorney
still
can
be
do
the
that.
real estate agent on the transaction, they could still have an agency, but I would suggest they would probably need some other disclosure stating how limited their agency is.
If the
Regardless, yeah, regardless of this agency, you understand that this is limited agency.
Tessie,
I'm
a
gonna
question for you.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever received a purchase contract from an attorney that uses his own paperwork to buy a property? Or
So
is it
I'm not in
always-
escrow, so I will be careful to stay in my own lane.
Oh, I
'cause-
thought you were in
Nope,
escrow.
I'm on
sorry.
I'm on the marketing and the branding side, so I help
I'm just
agents
curious about
to
that.
get to escrow.
What the
And
paperwork
then,
is they're using to.
so we have a contract in the state of Arizona, our escrow officer would provide that contract to the attorney. So if they had additional
So
paperwork,
you guys
but
have
to
your
my
own
understanding.
contracts that people could
But-
use to present an offer, so they could be calling the
It's
title
the
company.
same purchase contract that you guys use.
Yeah. So what's
it's
to
just
say
a
they can't
purchase
just
contract.
call a title company? What's to say that the title companies
They
can't
do.
advertise?
We actually have. We have like a for sale by owner who's selling a property to the renter who's in it or their brother or
But there's
sister, whatever it
nothing
might be, and
preventing
there's
the
no
title companies
realtors.
from
Never
marketing.
has been.
Never
It
has been.
hasn't changed.
Mm-mm.
There's
It
never
just
has
hasn't
been.
been
And-
The
publicized.
thing of it is
And trust me, we don't want
Yeah,
to
right.
because that's that many more
Yeah.
questions the escrow officer gets
Yeah.
faced with answering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easier for the escrow officer to have the buyers and sellers represented. It really truthfully
Yeah.
is because you guys know the process. You guys know the timelines. You guys know
Most of us.
most of you guys. But you guys know all of those things where buyers and sellers don't. So it's a lot more work for an escrow officer. So I feel pretty good that we're not going after
I was just
consumers.
curious. Oh, that was a whole different
So,
can of worms.
yeah.
You start
Yeah.
thinking, well, let's open the whole Pandora's box.
Yeah.
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 There's
And-
always been little niches that have come here and there, and sometimes they survive, and sometimes they don't, but they're usually a small percentage.
Yeah, and with yours with the buyer, unless the buyer is super savvy, that once you sign that buyer broker agreement, you're technically supposed to assist them. Your fiduciary duty is from start to finish.
Yeah.
But if they're asking you to just fill out the paperwork, I mean, I guess that's up to you how you want to handle and navigate that per your discussions, or there's going to be some sort of
Well, I wouldn't do it
clause or
personally.
something.
I
Yeah.
would just have it by a broker and get my full commission.
Yeah.
But this particular friend of mine was just like, I just see AI as some niche market coming out
Think
of
of it
this
as
that just
Yeah.
starts writing
AI or
contracts
somebody
and
writes a contract, who's going to, okay,
The
appraisal
contract's a
comes
very
in,
small
let's
part
just
of it,
say, they
Yeah.
write a contract, goes through the system, they're done, right? Appraisal comes in low, okay?
Now what?
Contract says you have 5 days to cancel, or you're gonna pay the seller the difference and you're agreeing to move forward. If they don't do something in there, they could lose 20 grand
Yeah.
in earnest money.
Their earnest money.
Because they don't have a fiduciary watching out for their interest.
And,
So,
and right there, lo and behold, would be a fantastic video to put out
Yep.
there to the public.
Yep.
Beware of these sort of things.
Show your
We're
value.
gonna have to do our own buyer beware
Yeah.
stuff, right? And showing our value. There's so much more than just a pen and paper. There's, well, I guess now it's not really pen and paper, but whatever, you get my point.
iPad.
Yeah, exactly. Computer and a keyboard. But these are the discussions that lead to great ideas of what to address and communicate with your sphere of influence. Like now more than ever, it is so important for you guys to be in front of your sphere of influence. And the more you're in front of your sphere of influence, the more likely you are to get buyers and sellers, right? Get that referral business. There's like 80%, 70% of buyer or sellers don't use the same agent again because they don't remember the agent that helped them, or they don't think the agent is still in the business. That's because the agent's not staying in front of them. This is going to force you guys to constantly stay in front of them. It's only going to benefit you guys.
Years.
In any platform. I'm all about like a mass attack, like hit them from all angles, find where they're at. Why not?
Do we have access to
So-
the media room and like teleprompters or anything? Will we have that to do?
yeah,
social media
just
posts?
call and set up some time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, to borrow the video room?
yeah.
Do they have a camera set up in there too? That'll
Not
record for
yet.
Do you have, like, a
Right now, all the
teleprompter, like, where you
tables
can read
and
a
stuff
script?
is from
Bring
this
your
room
I
in
have
there.
I have
Bring
tools
your
for
phone.
those where you can actually have it on your phone. So even if you're standing there holding your phone talking, you can have the script going while you're just looking at your phone, and you can read what you need to say.
It's
There's
not,
an
it's
app
not
for that,
completely
yeah.
set up
Yep,
yet.
there's apps for that, yeah.
Yeah.
Put it on an iPad, it's easier to read.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be a super formal video. So anything is better than nothing, right? And
You can
yeah,
also
so
have picture
again,
examples
have
of the
resources
voice
for all
of
those
the
things.
video.
So, yeah. My business card's up here, my contact information's on the buyer seller guys. I definitely recommend grabbing one of those, going through them, and if we want to brand one to you, just let me know. You have my email. And then even though he's gonna be emailing you out the slides, it's worth it to grab these, start going through them, start getting comfortable saying those. And, you know, again, we take for granted what we do on a day-to-day basis because we do it every single day. So,
So, just remember, look in the mirror every morning and say, you're an awesome realtor. I am an awesome realtor. I am worth whatever you're worth.
Gentry rocks.
Yes. Okay?
the I am worthy, I am valuable.
Yes.
I am worth every penny I ask for.